Our president, Rosemary De Lorenzo, will not be with us today, but we welcome you all, and I'd like to call the meeting to order at this time for a special meeting of the Board of Directors, 3rd Laguna Hills Mutual, as of Thursday, August 8th at 1:30 p.m. As you might notice by the agenda, we're basically going to be talking about budget today. So I'd like to acknowledge at this time any media. Do we have any media here? Anyone at all? Okay. Approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to accept?
So moved. Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Chair remarks. Just like to open by saying that the entire board and staff has been working hard on the budget, as well as other mutuals have also. But we've spent a lot of time looking at things, not only from just this year, but doing some strategic planning in future years to see how we can spread things out if we need to, and so forth. We've been gathering information and looking into things like waistline remediation, slope maintenance, contracting out, water, utilities, building structures, and roofs. And through this process, we've also been working close with GRF for their portion of our assessment value. So these are some things that we've been working on, and it's culminating today in the budget. This is our Vision 2, or version 2, I should say. So that ends my remarks. Are there any member comments that anyone would like to make that's not pertinent to the agenda items? Okay, seeing none. Chris, do we have any speakers at all? Okay. We'll move right on to number 6, review preliminary 2020 business plan version 2, and I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you to the board and to the president. I want to welcome everybody with regards to the version 2 presentation on the 2020 business plan for 3rd Laguna Hills Mutual Board. We're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation, but I wanted to first kind of reiterate what Steve just said, and then I want to thank, on behalf of our staff, thank the board for working with us diligently to put this budget together. You have, as you'll see in the calendar that we'll bring up here in a second, that we've had numerous meetings, some formal, some informal, and we have worked diligently to put together, I think, a budget that is very workable going forward into 2020. But I think the emphasis that I want to put on that this is continues to be a work in progress. As you know, I came aboard in February, and budgetary elements, working with Betty and her staff, and has been a process for me to learn this system here, but I believe that we are now getting a better handle on not only on our operations side, but on our capital side of where we want to go in the future and represent the residents of the communities out there, and especially in this case, 3rd. As on the calendar, budget calendar PowerPoint right there, obviously today's Thursday, August 8th, and as indicated, we've had numerous meetings before with 3rd, talking about landscaping, talking about maintenance and construction, having version 1 with the board, and now version 2. But like I indicated and Steve indicated, we've had numerous dialogues in between in order to facilitate putting the budget together that I think meets the needs and requirements of the board going forward. Just wanted to mention in the next couple of slides our mission statement, and which is really to ensure that the village residents receive unparalleled opportunities to enjoy the utmost in active living here, and to do it in a cost-effective and efficient manner. With regards to our strategic planning goals that we've had and supported, these are really the keys in backing up the budgetary processes that we ensure financial stability and longevity for the community, improve customer service to meet residents' needs and concerns, attract and develop high-quality staff, and implement technology advances that can facilitate both of those two things, and then continue to upgrade our infrastructure and maintain our infrastructure so that we don't have significant increases in our assessments due to the fact that we've allowed deterioration of our infrastructure going forward. On top of this plan and the budget plan, I also wanted to mention to those in the audience and watching that the Board of Directors participated in a strategic plan process that we have been working on, which also had one of its key factors that we need to create financial sustainability and have a program and develop that. This budget is part of that process, but I want to ensure that there are other things that we continue to evaluate our operations, and we continue to look at areas where we can not only save money, but also working with GRF now, looking at a committee that's also looking at revenues in the future and how that can enhance our program. Going to the next slide. This is a slide that basically presents where we stand with regards to the 2019 versus the 2020 plan. As you can see, what you have there is the original $434.39, and the 2020 plan is at $444.94. That's a $10.55 increase in the assessment. GRF is at $2.77. If you recall, GRF was actually $1 higher than that. We went back and were able to adjust some of their operating budget and reduce that back down to $2.77. So the total assessment proposed in the budget in the 2020 plan is now $13.32, or a total of $650.54 to a member in the Third Mutual. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Betty, and she's going to take you through the presentation specifically of version 2. And again, on behalf of our team here at BMS, I want to thank the board for your participation so far in this process, and we'll look forward to your comments.
Good afternoon. We're going to continue on the same presentation here with slide 6, and this is showing the assessment history for the last 5 years with the estimated assessment for next year currently at $650.54. So in orange, if you see it on your monitor, this is showing you the third portion, how it has adjusted just slightly over the years, and then the GRF portion in the gray, bringing you to your total assessment that has gone from $620 to $650 in a 5-year time period. First component of the business plan that we'd like to go over is related to staffing. And we wanted to show you here visually on this line chart that our staffing levels for 2020 are proposed at 751, and this is expressed in full-time equivalents. As you know, we have a lot of part-time positions, especially in the area of security and recreation, and so although we have more employees or bodies than this, in finance, when we're talking about budgets, we want to reduce that down to a full-time equivalent, or 2,080 paid hours in a year. And so that's 751. And that is very similar to the level we were at in 2011, or just slightly below that. So you can see there's been some slight changes in the staffing requirements. And we'll do a brief look at each department and their proposed staffing for next year. A reminder that this is shared staffing, so this isn't unique to Third. Right now we're talking top level for all 3 entities, GRF, United, and Third, and the staffing requirements to meet all of those services. Starting with the Office of the CEO. This is an increase of 1 position from 9 to 10 full-time equivalents, and that's the added marketing content editor that was approved this year and put on staff, so we've now included that in the budget. And that's what happens sometimes in the budget process. We're catching up to decisions that have already been made throughout the year, and so you see it here as a budget increase. Resident Services, this is a department that had an unfilled supervisor position for a couple years, and that work was absorbed by existing staff, and so we removed that position from your budget. General Services is showing a total staffing of 91 0.57. That is a reduction of 1.5, and that's due to a reorganization. And you might remember last year that we eliminated 2 department heads. We had a separate department head for landscape and general services, and that's now been consolidated under the COO, and instead we've used 2 senior managers to run those operations. And so we've added the 2 senior managers, removed the department heads, and this is the net reduction from that change. Landscape services is a total of 149 staff years or full-time equivalents, and this is an increase of 6.73. This is a correction to the budget. We had some positions that were approved on staff or enhancements or to sustain your landscape service levels last year. And also we eliminated some turnover factors that were artificially lowering that budget as far as the number of employees. And so this reflects your current service levels and staffing for landscape services. Moving on to broadband services, this department is remaining the same at 23 full-time equivalents. And information services, 10.5, no change there. That is also IT, the support of your computers and networks and so forth. Financial services, on the next slide, continuation of the departments, and you see an increase from 30 to 31 full-time equivalents. And this is a position that we added at a managerial level to improve our AR and internal controls for all the entities. Security increased 1.5 full-time equivalents based on scheduling needs, and recreation has 1.25 full-time equivalent increase, and this is due to the addition of a pool specialist, a position that was moved from the M&C department, and then slight adjustments in their part-time staffing hours. M&C department is a net change of 1, going up to 186.5 full-time equivalents. And this is, we actually had 2 additions here, an inspector 2 and an alterations coordinator. Those positions were approved already this year and now have been included in the budget for next year. And this brings us down to that total of 751 full-time equivalents, or a net increase of about 10 positions for the budget next year. So when you hear me talking about staffing costs for the departments and specifically your portion of these costs for third, overall it includes the addition of 10 positions. On slide 10, we see a little bit of a breakdown of your proposed assessment for next year. Your mutual portion has some revenues and some expenditures, and that is netting out to about $272 per man per month. We add to that your reserve contributions of $172.85, and the GRF assessment at just over $205, so that's how we get down to that $650, which is currently an increase of $1,332, or about 2.1% in total. I wanted to show you on slide 11 that you have various sources of revenues that help offset your costs. And your largest category here is your fees and charges for services to residents. In some cases, this is chargeable services, so it's a straight pass-through. Although we have the expenses down in wages and materials and supplies, the resident is paying for those services for which they're responsible. And so this is the reimbursement of those costs. You also have some fines and fees for violations of your various rules and governing documents, and so you do have some revenues there to help offset the administration and also some NOV violations. Your second largest category, interest income, is shown in yellow here on this pie chart, and this is truly your only source of revenue that has no offsetting cost, really. This is income that contributes to your bottom line, and this is money earned on your invested fund balances. Most of that is your reserves, a little bit from your operations. And the administrative costs and the investment costs are very fractional compared to the revenue that you bring in there. And then you followed by lease processing fees and laundry revenues, and then your resale processing fees. Those are your next 3 big categories before you get down to very miscellaneous categories of revenue. On the other hand, we wanted to show your expenses in total on slide 12. So these are your gross operating expenses, whether it's operations or reserves. And so you will see that your largest piece here is compensation, as you expect. We are a service organization, and much of your work is performed in-house by staff. But then next to that, you can see in yellow the outside services piece. So you do have a large portion of your work that is outsourced. And this is primarily for your roof replacements, your asphalt work, and so forth, and your plumbing remediation. In blue, you see the third highest category being your utilities, followed by materials and supplies and insurances and so forth. So what we're going to do now is present your total planned expenditures for next year by department. And this is whether it's from operating or reserves. We combined it together here so you can see the top level department costs for third. And not all of this is directly impacted by your assessment because some of these expenditures are out of reserves. And so we'll talk about reserves separately at the end of this segment of the presentation. And it sounds a little awkward to say we're going to do it by department and start with a non-department, right? But we do have several items that are not associated with a particular work center. And so if Chris will flip over to slide 28, we'll show you that this category we call non-work center exists to account for items that are not directly attributable to the departments. And it's primarily composed of your utility costs, that interest income that we discussed, and the miscellaneous revenues. So it's just a collection place for those items that aren't associated with a particular service that's being provided. And we definitely have a total budget here of $5.6 million, of which of the expenses, $5.8 million is in your operations budget. And then the revenue gets credited to reserves for that interest that's earned on invested fund balances. And so your increase year over year in this category is about $338,000, and this is primarily due to changes in utilities. We've updated your water rates to reflect the new rate schedule that was implemented by El Toro Water District on July 1st of this year, and we also incorporated a contingency for potential rate adjustments next year as well. And we did talk about these in detail at some of the prior budget meetings. And so if anybody has questions about that, we can certainly point you to the information on the Water District's website to see the details behind those rates. And then also we included a contingency here for an increase in your electric rates. We always update the assumptions for usage based on your trends for usage and then make an estimate for potential rates. There's also an increase here for legal fees of $130,000. And so I wanted to just jump over to slide 36, if Chris can make that change and show you that the mutual legal fees for which is for your general counsel and your collection services and filing fees and so forth, we are planning a budget that is more in line with your 2017 actuals. So that's a budget proposed at $220,000, $350,000. And that is in line with your current year actuals. I apologize for that. I'm looking at the wrong category. And then followed is a new line item for VMS legal fees. Inadvertently, we had been charging all of the VMS legal fees to GRF, and although VMS has 3 members, GRF United and Third, and so for 2020, we've made a plan to allocate those costs evenly, 1/3 to each of the members of VMS. And the VMS legal fees are projected to be about $500,000 this year, and we've included a budget of $450,000 next year. So this is your 1/3 share of that $450,000 budget. So we're going to take questions at the end. We're going to get all the way through the presentation, and then we'll go back to any item that you would like to discuss further. And Chris, if you'll jump back to slide 13, we'll move on to Office of the CEO. And this is a total budget of $530,000 for the third portion. And all of this is included in your operating assessment. None of this budget is paid for out of reserves. And that increase of $74,000 is due to that added marketing content editor position that we discussed, your portion of that position, in addition to the annual wage adjustments. And so I'll just stop here and let you know, because it's going to affect all the departments following, that we did include a planned wage adjustment for next year, a contractual wage adjustment for the union of 2%, which was negotiated last year over the term of their contract. We'll make adjustments each year to the contracted rates. And then for non-union, we've included a total of 3.2% for the wage adjustment pool. And a reminder that that covers not just merit increases at the end of your one-year review period, but also adjusts or accounts for any promotions or market adjustments or new hires where we have to pay more based on market conditions. It is still a tight labor market, and so we are feeling some upward pressure on wages there. And so that 3.2% hopefully will not be entirely eaten up by inflation, but will give us some extra room for those other adjustments that I spoke of. And so any of those types of adjustments that have occurred during the year are reflected in this budget for next year as well. And that's true for all of these departments. So resident services is a net cost of $477,000 for the third portion. This is all operating, and this is an increase of $215,000. And this is for the aforementioned reasons, the wage adjustments, but also a correction was made to the allocations, and more costs were assigned based on services provided. So this department primarily responds to mutual members who are calling in for services. And so they looked at the latest ticket information, adjusted their allocations, and you received a higher portion that was previously being charged to GRF. Also, there's a higher budget in materials for the purchase of access cards, which furthered this variance. General services is a catch-all kind of a department. They've got various different levels of operation, and their total cost here is $1.75 million, or an increase of $91,000. And this budget is primarily in your operations, just a little bit in reserves. And we do have a delineation on slide 29. It really just shows the two primary service levels, which is janitorial and streets and sidewalks. That janitorial includes your carport cleanings, freestanding laundries, bulky item pickups, and three-story building cleanings. And then the streets and sidewalk category includes your concrete repair and replacements, gutter cleaning, welding in the mutuals, and also garage sweeping and scrubbing and asphalt repairs. So lots of different particular services that go into that department, which were discussed in detail at earlier budget meetings, especially in May when we had a special M&C meeting. And so that increase is primarily due to a change in allocations from vehicle maintenance. So vehicle maintenance collects all the costs and then assigns them out based on who has vehicles assigned throughout the organization and how much they're spending to repair and maintain those vehicles, some of it in response to breakdowns and some of it preventive maintenance. And the support departments, in turn, have hours assigned to Third and United, and so you're receiving your proportionate share of those vehicle maintenance costs. Also, outsourced gutter cleaning moved from the M&C department, so this category includes an increase for that gutter cleaning transfer. Landscape services is the last department on this slide, and it's a proposed budget of $6,829,000. That's an increase of $515,000. Of the amount that went to operations, the assessment was increased by $196,000. And that was due to that staffing correction that we mentioned, where we had an increase of FTEs to match your current service levels. Also, there were some additional materials and supplies included for fertilizer and irrigation to support your various landscape programs. Moving on to slide 14, We have financial services with a proposed budget of $2,281,000 and an increase of $279,000. Of this, in operations, your budget is $1.5 million for financial services. And I do want to jump over to the delineation slide for financial services, which is slide 31, because this shows you not just the wages and related, but also the insurances. So a very large portion of this budget, about $1.5 million, is for your insurance programs. And we met with the brokers recently, a couple weeks ago. The insurance market is tightening up, as you would expect. Especially, you can see it there on that third to the last line for property insurance. We're anticipating an increase in that budget up to $1 million for the premiums because of all the disasters that have been occurring through, not just in California with the fires, but throughout the states with hurricanes and other natural disasters. So those premiums are anticipated to go up, as well as your liability insurance premiums, and that's an increase of $35,000. So we will keep reporting back to you as these numbers come in. Unfortunately, the renewal of our insurance programs is October 1st, and so it happens just a little late for our budget process, but these are the estimates, and it does include the latest information they have, but without having the actual bids that they get through marketing your insurance program. Back on slide 14, we'll move on to security services. And the cost of this department is $176,000 for the third portion. And as you know, for security, most of their costs are covered by your GRF assessment, but there is some allocated to you to cover for things like collecting the coins in your laundry facilities and so forth. And this budget proposal decreased because we're expecting some higher revenues for resident violations, and it's reflecting your current year trends in those revenues. Human resources, this is where you see that new line item for your share of the VMS legal fees. And maintenance and construction services, this department is a total budget of $16,698,000. This is actually a decrease for Third Mutual of $57,000. And although it does include the increases that we talked about for those two positions, the inspector and the alterations coordinator, this is combined with reserve programs. And so you're seeing some offsets in some planned reductions in the reserve programs. And so combined, you're seeing the effects of that. Also the change where we move the gutter cleanings to general services. So your total expenditures are $34,501,000 net of your revenues. I wanted to mention on slide 15 that you do have some surcharges that are added to this budget, and this is designed for those units that have common laundry facilities, elevators, and garden villa rec rooms. And so these are the operating funds that are included to repair, replace, or restore the components here through operations. And your laundry revenues, with the addition of your coin-operated dryers, we are anticipating that your revenues will offset the operating costs, so there's no net surcharge for laundry operations. And elevator operating increased from $337,000 to $375,000, and this is due to an adjustment in your elevator maintenance contract, which covers all the maintenance, inspections, and emergency call-outs for your 82 elevators. The Garden Villa Rec Room Fund, this contribution increased 25 cents per man per month, or about $4,000, and this is to cover all their planned repairs and replacements and refurbishments of the interior components of the 53 Garden Villa buildings. They have separate budget meetings with staff to determine what the Garden Villa Association would like to see as far as the upcoming budget year, and we've incorporated that scope of work into this budget. So I want to move on to reserves for a couple minutes and show you how you fund for reserve expenditures. The first item is a contingency fund, and instead of including a line item in your operating budget called contingency, which many HOAs do, because of the size of your operations, we put money aside into a reserve fund called the unappropriated expenditures fund. And none of this money is spent unless there's a supplemental appropriation approved by the board, and you have about $3 million anticipated in that reserve this year. And you're currently contributing $8 per man or per month, or close to $600,000 a year, plus some interest for money going into this fund. And then we assumed an average of $500,000 a year for your expenditures. This is completely discretionary to the board as to how they want to spend these funds. They're not required by civil code, and it really is to supplement your operating budget. Historically, over the last 5 years, your balance in this fund has ranged from as low as $1.8 million in 2015, all the way up to $3.2 million at the end of 2018. So we've included, maintained your assessment at $8 per man or per month to maintain that balance at around $3 million. The next fund is also a contingency. It's called the disaster fund. And this is like your unappropriated expenditures fund, except that you have earmarked it specifically for disasters. And this is one of the first funds established by the mutual, although its name has changed over the years from general operating to now the disaster fund. It's basically to cover uninsured damages of any sort, and even things such as land movement. So your planned expenditures every year, you can see it's pretty consistent at 1.7 million, and then an inflationary factor applied to that. And that is for all the damages that are paid, that are insured through your policies but fall below the $10,000 deductible. So we pay for all the deductibles through this fund. And you have expressed a desire to get this fund up to about $10 million. It's not a requirement, and each board can make their own decision as to the funding level here. You are currently contributing $27.70 per man or per month for this disaster fund. And in an earlier version of the budget, the board expressed a desire for a bottom line assessment increase close to $15, including the GRF portion. And so we used this contribution to reserve. We lowered it to help offset some of the increases in your operating budget. The Garden Villa Rec Room Fund, we can show you a projection here of what that fund looks like. You're currently contributing $5.50, and this is only the Garden Villa members that are contributing this assessment as a surcharge. And so you're basically building up this reserve a little bit, but keeping about $50,000, $60,000 in that reserve balance after you consider your expenditures for planned renovations. The historical balance in this fund has also varied. It's been as high as $120,000 a few years ago and as low as $61,000. Then we get into your replacement funds, or what we call your actual reserve funds. These are required by civil code, and you do have three of them. One's called the Replacement Reserve Fund, the Laundry Fund, and the Elevator Fund. The laundries and elevators were separated out in years past because they were part of a surcharge operation, but they have been included in the basic assessment. And so since they are now included in the basic assessment, I would propose something that we can discuss later, that you could consolidate these into one reserve fund. And I would even rename it and take off the word replacement because it's a little misleading. Your reserve fund can also cover improvements or new additions. And so the reserve fund title would not sound as limiting as that word replacement. And it would keep you in line with civil code and what other associations do. They just have one reserve fund. And your balances here are shown off to the right. We do anticipate the need for increases in your assessment over the next several years. And this is to cover all of the components for which the mutual is responsible for the repair or replacement of, including but not limited to, your building structures, plumbing, roofs, paving, and walls. And we anticipated this $5 increase in your reserves plan last year. When we made the updates this year, we were able to substantiate the need for that $5 per man per month. Moving on to the elevator fund, we were able to keep that at the $5 that you're currently contributing. And balance is going to grow just a little bit over the next few years at these projected assessments. And then on slide 21, we see the laundry replacement fund, and this is for the replacement of washers and dryers. And we were able to maintain the current assessment of $1 per man per month because you're just not going to have a lot of expenditures next year because of your recent additions of the new dryers. So when we bring all three of those reserve funds together into what we call the 30-year plan, the board's required by Civil Code to adopt a 30-year plan, and that might seem like a really long look into the future for 30 years, but we do have to report per Civil Code that you do have sufficient funding projected over the next 30 years to cover all your planned expenditures, and this is how we do that. We put in all your projected and planned expenditures, and then we bump up the assessments to ensure that you're contributing enough through your assessments and interest earnings to cover those expenses without falling below a desired threshold. And so you can see here on the that we're starting the year at just over $14.3 million in your reserve, and with our projections, you'll go about close to $8 million in 2023. You do have some big spend years in the next few years. It brings that balance down, and that's okay. That's what a reserve is designed for. It's designed to handle fluctuating expenditures, and you build up reserves, and you spend it down, and you build it back up, and that way you're contributing towards the eventual replacement of an asset over its entire life. And so visually, we're able to see your current threshold is $7.4 million, and that basically is your comfort level. And each board can make their own decision what they would like the threshold to be. But you're saying that even after we address all of our planned expenditures for waste lines and roofs and asphalt and so forth, we want to stay above $7.4 million. And that's primarily in case something unexpected comes up, if there's an early failure of a type of roof or an reserve expenditure that we didn't anticipate needing to address, then you've got some extra money there, or what we call a threshold, to address those needs, instead of drawing it all the way down to zero. And again, here you can see where it touches that threshold in 2023 when it gets down to $8 million. And then we have those same graphics for elevator and laundry. Elevator started this year at about $1.7 million, and we project it going as low as just under $1 million in about 10 years. You can see that visually on slide 25. Your threshold there is $620,000. And then your laundry reserve, you started the year at just over $700,000, and we projected those ending balances over the next 30 years with your lowest balance in year 2027 at close to $350,000. And then you can see that visually on slide 27. Again, in the next 10 years or so, we spend down to that threshold line and then build back up. Obviously, with reserves, we review these every year, make updates, because you have so many variables as far as costs, interest earnings, reserve balances. Expenses might come in higher or lower than we planned. If expenses come in lower, that money stays in reserve. It does not get spent. And then if we overspend for a program, maybe a water heater costs more money than we anticipated, we would come back to the board and get supplemental funding for that if it exceeds the annual operating budget. So we'll just go back to the summary slide, which is number 8. So that then concludes the presentation portion of the business plan, and we'd be happy to open it up to questions and entertain any suggestions for changes.
Okay, any questions? Annie?
Actually, I did have a question, and thank you, Betty, for referring all questions until the end of the presentation. So I think you answered my question, but just for clarification, in terms of the electricity, the residents, we as residents pay our own in-home electricity. So electricity overall, can you explain that to me?
It's common area electricity, so primarily walkway lighting,
Okay.
building lighting, in your hallways, or if you have illuminated, lights over your building numbers, in
Right,
your
right.
hallways, elevators, so any kind of electricity used for the buildings, the surrounding areas, the walkway lighting. There is a minor amount of electricity used for your sprinkler and irrigation systems, but they're also tied into those electric meters as well.
Thank you.
You do allow charging of electric vehicles in the mutual, and so you have an electric vehicle charge fee for the people who register their electric vehicle or electric golf cart, and they pay an annual fee to reimburse you for the electrical costs that they're using from those common area meters.
So then that money that's paid, that goes back into the general fund, is that what you're saying?
Right, it's part of that miscellaneous revenue.
Thank you.
Okay, Lynn has a question, then Reza.
Thank you, Betty. Betty, I have a question on slide 15, please.
Okay.
On the Gardenville Rec Room Fund, shouldn't that be $3 total assessment increase?
You're faster than me. I'm still flipping to
Okay.
slide 15.
Number 15.
Oh, well, we tricked you here, and we showed this in dollars, right? So the
Yes.
Garden Villa Rec Room Fund, your current assessment is equivalent to $82,000, going up to $86,000.
Oh, we're talking about
So that
1,000.
4 is actually representing $4,000.
Okay.
So it is an increase per man or per month of 25 cents.
Okay, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
that would be correct. Thank you.
Okay, Reza?
Just following up a question on the energy. Any of the renewable energy that we producing is offset here already? You take those in account, like solar or wind or
Yes, we aren't
geothermal?
as specific as you would like. We're not budgeting by meter or system, but we look at your trends. And so your usage is trending down, and so we're looking at your most recent trends in usage, and then projecting the rates for next year.
So you do use, you offset the cost with the income or whatever the things that get back from the Edison?
Right, so
Or
for
credits.
example, your budget or your actuals in 2016 were $450,000, and we've got your budget down to $310,000. Even all these years later, with rate increases, you're still below your 2016 amount.
Okay.
Along those lines, Betty, could you tell us, so far this year, approximately how much we've saved because of solar?
Well, that's definitely a Chris question.
Yeah.
I don't think we have that with us. We talked about it in finance on Tuesday, but I didn't bring that
Okay.
packet with me.
One of the figures I saw recently, yeah, was a total of around 133,000, but that was like a month ago. So it was on a sheet that you handed out.
Yeah, I would just have to get
Yeah.
the sheet. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's pretty.
So that's a nice reduction.
Yep.
Yeah, that brings up to the next question related to that, because we have investment in that area too, although we saved on energy. How you do the investment on that we put in place? Is that a 30 years investment? Is how we take that down or incorporate in the budget?
The payback calculations were done at the time of making your decision to go to those solar systems, but we're not managing an investment program as it goes. So I don't have updated figures. I believe you work through the Energy Committee and the M&C department to get performance data and reevaluate that.
No, I'm looking at, we spend so much money in order to put the system in place. That money need to be, spread over a period of time. How much per year we taking credit for that, or we pay the lump sum and just one time? How that worked out? We pay 2.5 million one time and we just ignore it, or are we depreciating every year? If
If I
we're
can answer your-
depreciating, that shows up
Okay, if I
here.
can answer your question, John has the background on this. He could probably address that.
Oh, it should be in here too.
terms of funding.
It should be in here.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of accounting purposes, are we including that in depreciating
Yeah,
the solar
that's-
as a separate asset? or-
We are not depreciating the solar system because as an HOA, we pay for your items out of reserve, and instead of funding depreciation, we put money into reserve. So what we've done is we've identified your solar system, and we're reserving for its eventual replacement. So every year, you're contributing some money into reserve for when those panels need to be replaced. And
Is
as
that
far
under
as-
building structures probably? Is that considered?
No, it's its own line item.
Oh, we have
system.
solar line, that's
Yeah.
right. There's a separate line item. I'll show you where that
Yeah,
is. You can
it's
see that.
because if it's depreciating, you should have that money in the reserve and
They're,
depreciate.
they're,
it on
they're
a
doing
yearly
that.
basis.
And the projection was, we talked about that the other day at the finances, 25 years is the theory of how long that's supposed to
No,
last.
the reason I didn't see anything here in regard
Right.
to that, so I didn't know what's happening there.
Okay, and John, continue if you would.
Yeah, I have a question. First of all, thank you to Betty and Jeff and the staff for lots of detailed analysis. I mean, it's really helpful to understand how things operate, and hopefully we got it right. We have a question about the disaster fund and the appropriated expense fund. I mean, we're making some changes there to, keep assessments under control while still being responsible to those funds. They're not official by code reserve funds, as I understand it. So if we wanted to make shifts in those funds during the course of the year, that would not be too big of a challenge, would it?
Well, as far as the assessment is concerned, you set that now. We can't change the assessment during
Right, but
the
what if
year.
we wanted to reallocate the way the money was being put into those funds during the course of the year?
Well, we don't spend anything out of either the disaster or the unappropriated expenditures fund.
Well, we're looking
It's-
worst case, just to get to the end game here. If there's a huge disaster and we want to allocate money into the disaster fund from the unappropriated expense fund, can we do that
Oh,
during the course?
absolutely,
Okay,
yes.
so that was it.
In any kind of major disaster, you would first look to obviously your insurance policy, get what you can out of that. Then you go to your reserve fund, because you are reserving for the replacement of roofs and asphalt, and if those are damaged, you would use your reserve fund for that. And then you would go to your contingency fund to supplement whatever you need.
I was just trying to clarify because we're always talking about how they're not official reserve funds, so they could operate a little differently in terms of earmarking the dollars if worst case happened and we needed to do something.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to clarify. Great,
Yes.
thank you.
But Betty, to continue that, during the year, can we take money out of disaster and move it into laundry?
No.
Okay.
By resolution,
That's all.
you've defined the disaster fund for specific things. You could, by policy, redefine it. It's not a required reserve fund, but you've put limitations on it yourself that could change.
But as it stands now, we can put money into it, we can't pull money out of it for different definitions.
Right.
Yeah,
For contingency.
right. Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Jeff, do you have anything to add to this?
Well, we did have a couple of items that we heard you wanted to consider. The potential of adding another dollar to your replacement fund and adding a component specific for energy projects.
Yes.
And then if you wanted to level out your assessment increase to the $15 that we talked about in the prior version, Chris is going to bring up a slide, it's slide 37, just to show you what that would look like if you want to end at the $15 that we talked about before. We got there potentially, we haven't made these changes, but you could consider a $1 increase to your replacement fund for those energy systems, and then just some adjustment there in your disaster fund to get that bottom line. You're using your disaster fund this year as a one-time offset to your higher operating costs. And so we just adjusted that to get you your $15 bottom line.
Okay. Yeah, we were shooting for a $15. So,
And so if you wanted to make those two changes, then we would have you do that through a motion.
okay.
As proposed, the numbers you've presented were at $13.32, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this would be, the slide 37 discusses raising the assessment to $15 total to create an energy fund essentially within our reserve.
Yes.
That, and to put some in the contingency.
Oh, put some back into contingency or
Yeah.
disaster?
Yes. Disaster.
Oh, disaster,
This
okay,
slide says disaster,
okay.
but it's also for the replacement fund.
Okay, so, would somebody make a motion, or I will, on setting our assessment level at $15 per man or per month?
I so move.
Okay, is there a second? Discussion? Yes,
I want to know what we losing for services. I just want to make sure that we are not losing any services as we're lowering from whatever it was, 17 and a half to 15. I want to see what the trade-off.
We're going the other way. The analysis that was just presented shows a $13.70-odd cent increase. This adjustment would increase it to $15 to add services, if you will, to add an energy fund and to increase our disaster fund. There'd be no reduction.
One version was 17.
That was two versions ago.
Yeah.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
They've done a great job of finding ways to get it whittled down, so now we're at
Yeah.
1370. The discussion is, are we gonna take it back up to 15 to get a little more protection for disaster and also start planning for energy issues that are coming down the pike?
Now the question goes back to when it says we went from 17 to 13, what we were losing, any services that we're losing through that reduction.
I see.
okay, Bunny?
Well, I just wanted to explain to Ray that there was no discussion ever, and I'm pretty sure that we did not change any service levels. You know, and that's usually the term, the service levels. Like if we decided landscaping only needed to be mowed the lawn 3 days a week instead of 5 or something like that, that's changing the service level. We have not changed any of the service.
That's exactly what I want to make
Correct.
sure that people hear.
Right,
that
and that's
we're
what I
not doing
understood.
this, we're not
Yeah.
cutting any services.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we also have some savings through M&C and also through landscape. Through landscape by contracting out tree trimming when that comes about, and the slopes, okay? And then by them reprogramming additional people into there will help boost up or sustain the levels as we want them.
That's what Calvin saw in the county, so we
Yeah.
go from 17 to 13 and not do any
Yeah.
services. That's great.
So let me turn that as a question to the staff. I remember those discussions. I feel like we found some additional revenue in chargeable services and a number of other odds and ends. Can you just confirm for us that we didn't reduce any staff levels, or I'm sorry, service levels in order to achieve the reduction from 17 to 15, from version 1 to version 2?
Correct. No change in service level.
Great question.
Okay, anybody else for discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion to set our assessments at $15 per man or per month increase? Any opposed? Don't see any? Okay, great. Okay, any follow-on comments, Betty or Jeff?
Just one, in previous conversations that I had with the chair and a couple of, I just wanted to mention one of the line items, that there was no change in the actual increase costs and expenditures, but as VMS, when we were evaluating our, some of our programs that we have in order to sustain the staff that we have and also in our recruitment, we did look at a 1% increase in our deferred comp match program. It's absorbed into our current budget. Our expenditures that we have under the current system is a little below what was fully budgeted. So we could make that 1% increase and do the calculation on who would potentially be eligible for that, and it would be absorbed into the current budget amount. So there was no increase to do
Okay.
it, but it's a good way to facilitate our pension. And for those in the audience and watching, our 401K is the pension plan for our non-union employees.
Okay, no, thank you for clarifying that.
I have a question about it. What's the time period for qualification to become eligible for the deferred compensation program?
You have to be an employee for a year before you can participate in the deferred comp plan.
Great.
in the match. You can do it on your own.
1% you're talking.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that concludes version 2, and I'll go around and take some board comments. Reza?
I would say my past experience on the assessment fees, what usually was, any of them that I had in the past was 3 to 5%. 2% I take it at any time. It's pretty good, especially when I ask the question, if we haven't cut any services, it's probably the same thing with 2%. That's below the inflation level. I mean, we should be pretty, happy about, the increases. That's
Yeah.
only capped at, really close to 2%. And thank you for the hard work of, the staff.
Yeah, staff did a lot of work on this.
Thanks.
Okay, Annie?
I just wanted to say thank you to Betty and staff for a very comprehensive report. Thank you.
Kush? Welcome back, by the way.
Thank you. No comment as such, but thank you for the hard work.
No comment.
Okay, Bunny? John?
I guess the only comment I want to make is I feel like we've arrived at the right budget for all the things we're trying to accomplish, but just to make sure that as this process concludes, there are 3 or 4 areas that we've identified that could lead to efficiencies, savings, improvements, et cetera, that I just don't want to feel like the budget gets locked in and all of a sudden now that's the way it is till next year. So I just want to reiterate for all the great work we did, there were 3 or 4 things we kind of bought in and said we hope that staff will find some answers that improve our resident services, for example, and a couple other areas that will make the investment well worth it.
Okay,
No comment.
okay. Lynn?
I want to say a big thanks to Betty and her staff for all the work you did, but also to the board members, because the board members have put a lot of work into this also. So thanks to everybody.
And I'd just like to make some wrap-up comments here. Some reasons why the increase is necessary. You have wages and salaries that are by union agreement. They increase so much per year. We have inflation factors, so nothing stays on an even plane per se. We have repairs that we are trying to accelerate, such as leaks and wasteline remediation, things like that, to try to speed up the process to prevent leaks. And some energy topics that are coming at us like a freight train. Some accomplishments we've had this year are in the areas of maintenance. We've energized landscape in the areas of fire abatement, slope contract, drought-tolerant projects, and then to Ridge Route, the installing of Shepherd's Crook, which is a year-to-year process. Bought street lights from SCE, and one big factor was replacing Roundup with a substitute, which is, in my mind, working pretty well. We finalized our leasing policy, began the process to increase the parking in the wedding cake area, that's between gates 5 and 6, and we hope to complete the cul-de-sac signs by the end of this year. Another big thing that I think all the mutuals can take pride in is the creation and the results brought about by the Investment Task Force. And that's representatives from each of the mutuals, GRF, and appointed designees who understand investments. And I believe, Betty, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time it's really been looked at in depth in 35 years. Is that about it?
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. So we took a real deep plunge in that. Betty was part of this group, and really happy that they did it. And we look forward to some more comments from them in the future. So at this time, we need to take a vote, and I would move that we recommend moving forward with a resolution to accept the budget as presented, a $15 per man per month increase. Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Okay, and in the back, we have that. Any opposed? Seeing none? Okay, we'll move forward with that, and as Betty has said, the...
Did you need to offer the member comments?
excuse me just a moment.
At least offer them
We did that
to us.
before. This is ours. This is our board.
That's just our board?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The resolution for this will come forward and be passed in September. So with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting.